We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Tensions between the two remaining superpowers, the United States and China, continue to grow. Whether it's an economic Cold War, global positioning in favor of America's political adversaries, and even the modern-day globalist version of soft power influence, China is indeed America's chief competitor. And yet, from the White House, nary a discouraging word is heard. Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special edition, we discuss all things Middle Kingdom with our panel of experts, Dave Patterson and Andrew Moran. And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Let's dive right in, introduce our panel, and talk all things China. And here we are. We're going to be talking all things China today, how this impacts America economically, how this impacts America militarily. And to join us in the conversation and to aid with hopefully a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of experience, we're joined by Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's Economics Affairs editor, who knows everything fiscal there is to know in the world, and Mr. Dave Patterson, retired Air Force pilot and former Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense Controller. And that is not the first time I've said that today. This is the only time I have gotten that particular title right. Welcome aboard, Dave and Andrew. Mr. Dave Patterson.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be with you.
Okay, guys. So I figure what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss all the various factors that are impacting American policy at the moment, how the things that China are doing are actually impacting people in the United States and indeed in the wider world. And I guess the first thing I want to start with is what China's doing to America with the assistance of America. And there are two things that spring to my mind there. And that's firstly, there's the SPR sell-off, that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve sell-off that was first discussed with China so they could, I mean, as far as I can see, so they could get advance warning and buy up the Strategic Petroleum Reserves. Let's start with you, Andrew. What went down there?
Well, reports came out a couple of weeks ago that said Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm, she communicated with the Chinese government about its plans to dump all this oil from the emergency stockpiles, or as you call it, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But later, when this report came out, Granholm said, oh, well, we were just discussing this with all the countries because this was supposed to be a globally coordinated event. But the problem with this, well, there are many problems with this issue. The main idea, as I discussed on previous LN media, was that the idea was that China would be focusing more on buying more from the U.S. as opposed to buying more from Russia. The issue is that China bought both Russia and the United States, so that plan backfired immediately. The second thing too is that right now, as a result of buying from both Russia and the U.S., China now has the world's largest stockpile of crude oil. Despite having an anemic post-pandemic economy where GDP is coming less than expected, you have deflation now, they're canceling unemployment data to report to the public. They have 1 billion barrels of crude oil sitting in its reserves, which is astronomical because now they can weather any storm, any geopolitical strife, whatever the case. So I find the SPR, China, and the U.S. Quite a fascinating turn of developments.
Dave, let's talk about what these words actually mean. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I think the important word there, Dave, is strategic, isn't it? And if Joe Biden is selling off America's strategic reserves, doesn't that mean that they're limiting future potential strategies?
Well, it's an ugly situation on two levels. First of all, that he would basically reduce the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, as you say, which is supposed to be used in emergencies to backstop problems in the United States. And
sorry to interrupt, Dave. There is an emergency. Joe Biden's polling numbers are just going down. That is the national emergency, I believe. Please carry on.
That was going to be my second point.
Oh, sorry.
The fact is that the petroleum reserve is an emergency capability that you use obviously only when you have in a crisis or contingency. The Biden administration has chosen to use that far more for political reasons to backstop their failing policies in terms of the economy, as well as to try to lower the fuel costs at the pump. And in every single case, they have failed miserably because it's a perverse approach to managing a country like the United States.
I think it's worth pointing out, too, just for the audience, to put this in context, since President Biden was inaugurated, the Strategic Petroleum Reserves have declined 43%. So nearly half of the reserves are gone. When he took office, it was more than 600 million barrels. Today, it's more than 300 million. This is quite incredible. It's also worth pointing out, too, is that when the initial crash in oil prices happened in the early days of the pandemic, President Trump, he wanted to start scooping up barrels and barrels of oil at $20 a barrel. So he would have added enormously to the stockpiles, but Democrats said, no, you're bailing out big oil. So I think that's also worth pointing in the context in the issue of SPRs.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes, Andrew, to the basic, crackerjack philosophy and economic position that the Biden administration has, which has always been to buy high, sell low. And it is just indicative of how naive and foolish they have been.
Well, it's really funny that people aren't realizing that this reserve, as you say, it's for emergencies, national emergencies, above and beyond Joe Biden's poll numbers. But the fact is, there's a war taking place in Europe, and it's with Russia, and Russia is not that far away from America. And if anything were to, God forbid, if anything were to escalate, then you've got a position where Russia and China hold all of the world's oil reserves. They could essentially shut us down, shut America down, shut Europe down, couldn't they, if they...
Well, don't you have those windmills? The windmills can keep everyone warm and cook their foods and all that stuff. So we're perfectly okay with windmills and solar panels, guys.
Dave, what's your military background take on this?
I think that the fact that the Biden administration actually sold, to Andrew's point, 200 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is important, and that China bought it in order to fill their coffers. It is really the important point here. I don't believe that. I'm not a gloom and doomer. I mean, the United States would rally. We would use the what's left of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve as a backstop. We can still buy from OPEC, and so I think that we wouldn't go belly up. On the other hand, we have to realize, too, that while we're chatting about, the ease with which we would buy from OPEC, China has becoming more and more intrusive into the daily lives of the OPEC nations, particularly in the Middle East, with recent military exercises with the UAE. I mean, who would have ever believed that?
Well, actually, I think it's worth diving a bit more into the issue of OPEC and also U.S. production. So first, U.S. production has, aside from the first 2 weeks of August, has been flat for all of 2023, and compared to previous years, is actually below trend growth. So I don't know if the country could rally around that, because production is on the decline. You look at the Baker Hughes oil rig count, that's been on the decline since last October, since hitting a post-pandemic peak. So that's worth pointing out. When it comes to OPEC, OPEC's new strategy is now to look forward to Asia. It's no longer concerned about the United States. Now, this, whether it's economic and politically, I'll leave that to Mr. Patterson. But we look at all the data, all the announcements. It's clear that Saudi Arabia and all the OPEC and OPEC plus nations, they're rallying around China. Just the other day, the BRICS, which I don't know if you guys want to go into that too much, but the BRICS summit, they announced that they're all issuing all these bonds in other local currencies other than United States dollar. So politically, the OPEC doesn't so much care about the United States anymore. Plus, OPEC production has been on the decline to support prices at the price for, I think, at least $70 a barrel. So that's also worth pointing out too, just based based on the fact that the United States, they want to replenish the stockpiles or the SPR when prices are below $70. So it's such a convoluted issue that I don't know if the U.S. could withstand an emergency.
Well, we'll be delving into what China's doing in other parts of the world, specifically the relationships they're forming, after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.